I might write down some of the dialogue that people are going to say, but when you actually sit down and start drawing it, working it out, this is when it sort of comes to life on the page. It's the hardest thing to explain is that the language of cartooning is a combination of words and pictures, and they are together. They're not two things. It's not like you write and then you draw. You do it at the same time. So if you were doing a novel, say, you might describe a room.
Right.
But the writing is the drawing. So it's actually like you'd never have any real description because everything is drawn. And it's like a kind of a magic happens on the page when you do it, that it comes to life and things just connect. So you might start drawing up here at the top. You might have an idea what's going on the page. By the time you get to the bottom of the page, something is formed
The story
on the
is
page
formed.
itself. And it's like the drawings start connecting to each other, a rhythm develops.
Right.
So much of it happens in the actual process of doing the work. So while there is planning, of course, everything's got planning involved in it, there is a kind of spontaneity to the language itself that wouldn't be much different than the way a writer might sit down and just type out a page and something has come together right there.
What struck me as a bit curious was the fact that all of your coloring is the same. So you have, you have beautiful gray and you have black and white. So is that a reflection of a dreamlike state, or is this something that's typical in cartooning business?
It's actually it's a less interesting answer than you'd expect, and that's because when I started working in comics back in the 1980s, this was pre-computer.
Yes.
And having any kind of color in a printed comic book was expensive. So like the big companies had full color comic books, the kind of comic books everybody knows.
Right.
But the kind of underground cartooning I started out in, which was very much like a subculture, with small publishers, not a lot of money, most people just drew their books in straight black and white. I like to have a tone, so I talked to the publisher and I'm like, can I have some kind of a tone? And he's like, we can do a gray tone. They could afford that. Later on, when things got a little better, we could afford one color. And so the one color I picked was blue.
Right.
After 10 years of working with blue became my predominant color that I use.
Right.
Now blue, of course, is very good for the kind of work I do because it's kind of melancholy.
Right.
It kind of reflects, a sort of dreamlike quality
Right.
like you mentioned.
Right.
But of course, like when I work in my sketchbooks or something, see if I've got a sketchbook here, I do. Like, I work in a variety of colors, like,
Oh,
like
you do?
here's,
Oh, that's
here's
interesting.
like something that's all green,
Okay.
or, here's something that's all purple.
Okay.
I've gotten very used to working with a single color.
Right.
But of course, I do, work in a variety of forms, and so sometimes I might do something that's, full colored. But generally in comics, I like to keep it simple. So like this one I showed you here,
So is this your most recent? No.
Yes.
Clive Fans?
this is my most recent book.
Okay.
Although I worked on this book for 20 years.
Wow.
So it just came out last year after 20 years of working on it. So in a way, saying it's my most recent book is a bit strange.
Right.
Because I started it in 1997.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Most books don't take me that long.
Wow. The older you get, does your work change, or has it changed? And how has it changed?
Well, absolutely, of course. For one thing, I don't struggle the way I used to when I was like in my 20s. When I would draw in my 20s, there was a great deal of struggle to get what I wanted to do. Like any skill, just years and years of doing it, you become more proficient. So
Yes.
I can sit down now, and anything I have to draw, I can draw it without a great deal of struggle. Some things are more complicated than others. If I had to draw like a stable full of horses or something, that's the kind of thing where I'd have to get some reference and struggle with it a bit.
Right.
It's not the same as drawing like a street scene, which I draw all the time. But besides that, the biggest thing that changes as a cartoonist, as a writer, as an artist, is that I don't have to guess what my work is about anymore. When I was 20, I can remember thinking, like, what am I going to do? What is my work about? What am I going to write?
Right.
It was an open vista. You don't even know who you are at that point. Now, when I sit down to work, it's like the ideas are already there. It's like there's a direction. You're on a path.
Yeah.
It's no longer like grasping for things. You're like working your way along a certain path, and everything you do is part of that path. It narrows, so it's not as wide as it once was. But like when I sit down to work, it's like there's 10 ideas I might be working on at all the times, and they all fit together very neatly into who I am.
That's beautiful. That means that you know yourself really well and you're pulling from all of those long-time personal experiences, right?
I'm trying. I mean, I do think essentially the kind of work that a cartoonist does when you sit here by yourself for most of the day, for most days, and you're in a relationship with yourself, a constant back and forth of dealing with memory,
For
with
sure.
desire, with self-knowledge, all this kind of stuff. You're going through it in your head over and
Yeah.
over again,
Yeah,
and it informs the work.
yeah. So for people that may not know who you are, Seth, you've certainly had tremendous accomplishments. So I know you were on the cover of the New Yorker 3 times. Your Palookaville. By the way, how many are in your series with Palookaville?
I mean, how many issues of
How many
Palookaville? I think,
issues?
you know, well, they're now more books than they are comics, so it's kind of changed. I think I'm somewhere in the 20s.
Wow.
They're more like actually, here's one right here. So they're more like a little book now than they are like a comic.
Right.
They
right.
started out, though, as a traditional comic book, but now they're, typically more like an actual book.
So 23 issues more?
Something like that, yeah.
Wow.
Or
That's-
24, something like that.
And how long would it take you to do one issue?
Yeah. Well, you know, they come out very infrequently. I'd say like once every couple of years.
Okay.
It's funny, like I say, this book took 20 years to make, but I didn't work on it for 20 years, obviously.
Right.
What I did was work on it for a few months, a year,
Set it aside.
and because I'm always working on a wide variety of projects. Sometimes I think it's counterproductive. It would make more sense to sit down for 6 months and do a whole book
Right.
instead of taking 3 years where you do it for 2 months every year.
Right.
But the thing is, I think there's a kind of a beauty to just allowing yourself to follow certain paths,
Sure.
and you produce a lot of different work that way.
Mm-hmm.
A great deal of the work I do, for example, is never really shown or isn't really like work that you publish. Like I have these kind of notebooks, for example, where I might do like comic strips, or I might just do like a great deal of writing about things.
Wow.
Now these
wow.
go on, there are hundreds and hundreds of pages
Oh
of
my
these kind of
God,
books,
That's beautiful.
and they're not published. They're part of a process that leads to other work, but they're not finished work. And so there's a tremendous amount of this kind of work I do that's part of making the work, but it's not the final work.